Hey everybody, I am Ryan Doyle, and this is the Rarity Table, where we have been helping new and experienced Dungeon Masters run Dragons of Stormwreck Isle from the D&D Starter Set. This time, we're doing DM prep for Seagrow Caves, Chapter 2. We're getting weird with Myconids. Myconids. I make them sound like they're from Mykonos half the time. I don't know why. In your game, pronounce it however you like. Myconids, like the mycorrhizal fungal network, is probably the correct pronunciation. And if you don't know what the mycorrhizal fungal network is, then I highly recommend listening to the Radiolab episode From Tree to Shining Tree, preferably while you're taking a walk in the woods. But all right, Dungeons and Dragons. First, I want to zoom out a little bit and highlight something that this starter set does really well so you can apply this lesson to your future Dungeon Master career. While there are definitely other systems out there that do specific things better, I believe a big part of why Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is the most popular thing ever is its ability to take on different tones and genres, keeping things interesting and dynamic for the players and the Dungeon Masters alike. This adventure does a lot in 30 pages. First, it gives us a chance for socializing, dialogue, character development, even a deep dive into lore and/or cozy cottage core vibes, if you want to go that way, with Dragon's Rest. The Clifftop Observatory is going to deliver that epic high fantasy most of us are expecting, somewhere on a spectrum between Tolkien and Marvel, depending on how things go and how you describe it. But in between, we get a real edge-of-your-seat horror suspense experience at the Cursed Shipwreck. And in Seagrow Cave, we're getting that special sauce that makes D&D so good, the high strangeness, the gonzo, the weird. According to your taste and what your players respond to, you can adjust these dials to suit your table. You can also mix and match them, blending them together, even adding other tones and genres to the mix. Now, personally, I like variety, which is why I like this little adventure so much. I'll also say that shifting between these settings, session by session, or even encounter by encounter, is probably the best way to keep the players engaged and accommodate the different preferences of the 3 to 5 people at your table so everyone's getting their favorite stuff some of the time. Okay, let's focus in on Seagrow Caves. With a bag of kitchen scraps rotting away in their inventory and the promise of healing potions on their successful return, I think the party is incentivized to come here first. If they do visit the Compass Rose first and are level 2 when they arrive here, not to worry, this adventure has done the work for us and provided encounter balancing for second level characters as well. And I know some groups will just start the characters at level 2 and run both chapters that way because level 1 characters are notoriously squishy in 5th edition, and that's a perfectly fine option. But I like the sense of fragility and danger of level 1 characters and the sense of satisfaction of leveling up at the end of Seagrow Caves and again after Compass Rose. It's going to keep the players eagerly looking forward to that next session all week. Seagrow Caves is about as far from Dragon's Rest as it gets, and Tarak might suggest they take the little rowboat tied to the dock down there. They can also walk along the coast, though the tides might force them to walk along the cliffs instead of down at their base. And I really love that they incorporated tide tables into this adventure. It keeps the fact that we are exploring an island front and center while also building in a natural way to measure and express time. We could do a whole video on why time is important and an often overlooked element, but for the sake of this introductory series, just keep one eye on the in-game clock and thank me later. If it is low tide when we arrive, that walkway around the edge of B1 is in fact walkable, whereas if it's high tide, then we're talking about swimming when we meet this Spore servant Octopus. The basics of underwater combat are covered on page 17 in the rulebook included in the starter set and are going to make fighting this dead sea creature reanimated by fungus much tougher. Now, one thing about this fight, whether they're standing on solid ground or they're doing the doggy paddle, this is, or at least was, an octopus. Even though it's given us, Last of Us vibes with mushrooms growing out of it, the defining feature is it's got 8 arms. So why is it limited to 1 attack? The answer is we don't want to kill anybody. Sure. So we're going to give it more attacks that do less damage. I give it 2 bludgeoning attacks with those tentacles, but drop the damage die down to a d4 and spread them around to different targets. Then I have a 3rd attack reach out and try to grapple somebody. Even if a character has negative constitution modifiers, they can hold their breath for 30 seconds. A round is 6 seconds, and there's no way this fight is going 5 rounds unless the players are incredibly unlucky or they make some pretty dumb choices. This means no one's probably going to drown here, but it is sure going to feel like it when they get wrapped up in a fungus-covered tentacle and dragged beneath the water. If they get pretty beat up in B1, the players might want to take a short rest and roll their hit dice before advancing further into the caves to B2. If they want to take a long rest, explain that they can only do that once every 24 hours. It's a night's sleep after all. And if they just sit here until tomorrow morning, the tides are likely going to come in and sweep them out to sea. When they do advance into the fungus farm, we really want to drive home the weirdness. It is dark. It smells really sulfuric in here, and there's this huge variety of colorful mushrooms growing, some nearly reaching the ceiling of this 50-foot high cavern. And amid this multicolored myriad of fungi, there are 2 weird little mushroom people spreading fertilizer around. They look and act like children. We want to broadcast to the players that they can at least try to talk to these myconids, who are by nature peaceful creatures. If it's got a stat block, you can kill it. And they're coming fresh from a fight here. So to make sure we don't instantly go back into combat here, we're going to emphasize that these are kids, and then we're going to have them run away from these armed strangers who just turned their fearsome guardian into calamari. I like treating the violet fungi in here as more of a trap than a standard combat, so personally, I would give the characters a chance to spot them with a decent nature or even just a mere perception check. It can be a cool jump scare when a mushroom suddenly reaches out, but we just had a fight in B1 and we've got Stirges on deck, so I would give the party a chance to at least avoid this fight if they choose to and play smart. Before we move on, I just have to say, I love the details that these heart cap mushrooms aren't the cartoony Valentine's Day sort of heart you may have been picturing. They look unsettlingly like an anatomically correct human heart. I love weird mushrooms. As treasure, that's also potentially poisonous. It's great to add into any dungeon, underground, or a dark environment. I made a batch of 20 that is available on DriveThruRPG or my Patreon. Check it out if you are enjoying this content and would like to support the channel a little bit. Hitting like, the subscribe button, the bell, sharing this video, leaving comments, also great ways to help me out, and those don't cost a thing. B3 is the larder, where Tarak's bag of food scraps is destined to go get composted down into fertilizer. I like the fact that the Stirges don't bother the myconids because the mushroom people don't have blood. You can drive yourself nuts thinking about dungeon ecology when designing adventures. What are they eating? Where does the poop go? So once again, I remind you that you, as the Dungeon Master, are always going to think way harder about this stuff than your average player. But whenever I get a chance to show that there is a weird and wonderful world here chugging along, whether the player characters are interacting with it or not, I take that chance. Lately, I've come to realize that Stirges are actually really polarizing monsters. I think some DMs are just over them because they're sort of overused in early level play, and I think a lot of players from older editions are holding on to some like trauma from these things. But me, I like them because they are weird and they are different. A hideous mosquito bat creature attaches to you with their hypodermic proboscis to drain your blood. So are you going to pull it off or are you going to try to swat at it? Choices. Now, whether it is in this room, the first room, the next room, at some point, our heroes are likely going to talk to these myconids. I like the idea of them talking to some sprouts first, the kids, and eventually being like led by the hand by one of these weird little guys to the circle chamber at B4 to talk to the adults. By the way, don't worry about keeping track of who is who down here. I suggest you take a Post-it note, a slip of paper, and just write down all of the names in this section. There are a lot of them, but the only one worth emphasizing and remembering is the leaders, which is Sinessa, so feel free to change that. If in transcribing this list you feel like changing any of the names or simply leaving some of them off, go for it. But hold on to this list of fantasy names even after you've completed Seagrow Cave, because having a name ready when somebody stops a random NPC or monster is one of the most valuable tools a dungeon master can have prepared behind their dungeon master screen. Whatever you end up calling them, keep in mind that the Myconids don't communicate through language, they use rapport spores. Suddenly, we're sharing a telepathic trip where we are literally sharing each other's feelings. Did someone at the table roll up a standoffish lone wolf type who hasn't quite gelled with the party yet? Well, here's your chance to put a stop to that stuff within the story and get everybody working closely together as a team. And somewhere within this psychedelic group therapy, we are also going to hear from the Myconids as well and establish what's going on here. Volcanic fumes are sickening these poor mushroom folk. Their dear leaders set up the Spore servant Octopus to protect them before crawling back to their inner sanctum where they lie now, barely clinging to life. The source of these fumes is the Crystal Cave, which they only enter at night because of their aversion to sunlight. Only lately, it seems like the fiery light never stops shining, even despite all the soot and smoke that's collecting there. And that light is not in fact the sun, but coming from this fire crystal that's formed and blocked the ventilation of these volcanic toxic gases. Now, the book has it set up so the players have to break this crystal and release the fire snake, and that is fine. The pieces of the broken egg are worth 250 gold pieces altogether, after all, but if the players are clever and or get good rolls, I would allow it to happen other ways as well. If they end up carrying this warm obsidian stone around for a while, that's fun, and you can have it hatch later at some perfect opportunity. Or maybe they trade it to Mila for some gold or goods, and this fire snake ends up hatching and causing havoc at Dragon's Rest one night during dinner. The point is, the game is way better when the players are given the freedom to make choices, and we as the Dungeon Master don't have to be afraid because we can always roll with it. Your favorite moments are not going to be what's written in the book. They'll be what you didn't expect. Your players will surprise you, and it will usually be a great experience, but sometimes maybe not so much. This book, like most pre-written adventures, is built around the assumption that the player characters are going to behave like heroic good guys. But here's something I don't see anybody talking about. Your players might decide that their characters are kind of jerks, and that does not make them bad people. Your friends or family are pretty much lawful good all day, every day in real life. At least I hope so. Though chaotic good is looking better and better to me lately. Anyway, given the opportunity to let loose in a fantasy world without consequences, there's a good chance your players might feel like trying something else on for size. So just know that there's a slim chance the characters come into these caves and just murder everybody. Maybe they're mad after the violet fungi lashes out at them when they just came to help. Maybe you didn't watch this video all the way and didn't realize why you should try to make these first little sprouts extra cute and childlike. Maybe somebody just had a rough day and they rolled up to game night and they chose violence. The Myconids are pacifists, so they won't throw the first punch, but they will definitely defend their home and their children. If the PCs are outnumbered, they might be in trouble here. And remember, if a Myconid takes damage, all the other ones in here know it because of those distress spores. If it's just one character acting up, maybe they get stunned with those pacification spores. But if it's a fight, then I wouldn't pull any punches. If the characters all drop to 0 HP, maybe I'd have them wake up hours later drifting in that little rowboat with a level of exhaustion, or maybe turn them into compost and roll up some new characters. I really don't think it will come to that, though. I bet they make some weird mushroom friends here and head on back to Dragon's Rest with some gold to spend and potion ingredients for Tarok, and they get to level up for the next leg of the adventure. If they came here first, then that means they'll be heading for the cursed shipwreck of the Compassed Rose. So I'm going to help you prepare for that one next time. Hope I see you there. Until then, be kind and have fun.